Hi everyone, welcome to Family Sunday. Today we're talking about the second part of the Jonah story, and we're talking a bit about attitude today. Do you know what the word attitude means? Check now with a grown-up if you're not so sure. Maybe you could come up with a definition together. And if you haven't watched our story video this week yet, go and have a watch. I'll put the link down in the description box as always. Go and have a look at this week's story video. Gosh, it's a bit of a gross start to a story, isn't it? Being thrown up by a fish. Imagine what else came out of that fish's tummy. Ooh, yuck. Poor Jonah on that beach, but I don't think he felt very sad, did he? He felt so glad to be back on dry land again. And then God spoke to Jonah, didn't he? Again, he said, go to Nineveh. How do you think Jonah felt about being told to go to Nineveh this time? You know, the Bible doesn't really say how Jonah felt. We're just left to imagine how he might have felt. But it does tell us a lot about how the people felt when they heard Jonah's warning. What was the people's attitude to what they had heard? People were really sorry, weren't they? They had quite a sad attitude, I think, but also quite a hopeful attitude. They really wanted to show God how sorry they were, and they were really hopeful that he might forgive them. That's a good attitude to have. Does anything surprise you about how the people responded? What surprises me most is how the king responded. Kings did not get off their thrones. They did not take off their royal robes, and they certainly didn't sit down in the dirt. Kings would have had everything done for them in those days. Absolutely everything. They never would have done things like that. I think that's really surprising and really cool that that king knew that God was more important than he was. That's a really good attitude to have. When the people said they were sorry, God decided to forgive them, didn't he? He changed his plans. He decided not to destroy their city. What do you think we can learn about God from that? I think it's really cool that God didn't destroy that city. I really like knowing that, it doesn't matter how badly I mess up, how badly I go wrong, or how bad a thing I do wrong, God will always love me and he'll always forgive me if I show him sorry. I think that's really cool, and this story really reminds me of that about God. That's not really what Jonah thought though, is it? That's not what he had going on in his mind. What was Jonah's attitude to the situation? Do you think he was right or wrong in what he thought? Whenever I read this story, I'm always like, what? How can Jonah feel like that? How can he be having a grump about God being so kind and loving and merciful? I think Jonah's crazy. But then I think there's another way to think about it. Have a think about this situation. Imagine that you're at home and your brother or your sister or maybe your friend is there and they've done something really mean to you and they've hurt you really badly. And it wasn't an accident. You know that they've done that on purpose to hurt you. Well, you know that they're going to get punished for that, don't you? You go and tell your parents, and your parents say, right, this is the punishment, this is what is going to happen, because you shouldn't have hurt your brother or sister or friend. And then the person who's hurt you says, oh, well, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. I know I did a bad thing, and I'm really sorry. I'll make it up to them. I won't do that again. And then one of the parents says, oh, well, that's okay. You don't have to do your punishment then. As long as you're sorry, that's all right. No punishment for you. That's a bit of an interesting situation, isn't it? I wonder how you'd feel in that situation. I'm going to put that situation up on screen. I'm going to write a little bit about that situation, and I'm going to put a couple of questions down at the bottom for you to talk about. Because I think that's a really interesting situation to talk about, and it's a little bit like the situation Jonah found himself in. We've talked before, haven't we, about how the Bible uses pictures to help us understand things. Sometimes something's a bit complicated and the Bible writes out a picture or a story, and it's to help us know what's being spoken about. Well, here, God does that for Jonah. I think that's really cool. God sees that Jonah doesn't really understand what's going on. So God makes a picture for Jonah right there, doesn't he? He makes that plant grow up and give Jonah shade, and then he sends that wiggly worm along to eat that plant up and kill it. Jonah feels really cross about the plant, doesn't he? But God explains a bit more. What do you think God was trying to show Jonah through that picture? I think that's a really cool picture. God was saying, Jonah didn't plant that plant. He didn't plant it as a little seed. He didn't water it. He didn't look after it. But God made those people in Nineveh. He looked after them. He made sure they had what they needed. And, they needed somebody to teach them what was right and what was wrong. And God wanted to do that. I'm saying, well, Jonah, you're sad about that tree. You didn't do anything to help it grow. I've done so much to help those people grow. I love them so much. If you're sad about that tree, how much more sad am I going to be if all those people died? But here's a really interesting thing. The Bible doesn't tell us what Jonah's response was. It doesn't tell us whether Jonah said, oh yes, I understand now, God, I'm going to change my attitude, or whether Jonah carried on being grumpy, carried on having not such a good attitude. So here's my challenge for you. In your family, split into two groups, or if there's only two of you, just have the two of you. One person or one group has the job of writing or saying what Jonah might have said if he understood what God was talking about, if he changed his attitude. And the other person or the other group has the job of figuring out what Jonah might have said if he didn't change his attitude. Then you can say those things to each other. And maybe you could talk about which one do you think is more likely? Which one do you imagine that Jonah actually did? We won't ever know the answer, but sometimes it's fun and interesting to think about those things. Have a go. We've talked a lot about different attitudes today, haven't we? I wonder, what do you think you can learn about your own attitude from reading this story in the Bible? I wonder, is there anything you're going to change from now on? That's the end of Family Sunday for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to make something, we made these very cool wiggly worms on Saturday craft, and they go along on the table like this if you blow with a straw in just the right place. I think they're really cool, and I'll put the link down in the description to where you can go and make your own wiggly worm. I hope you've enjoyed Family Sunday, and I'll see you next week. Bye!